Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast. You know it, and we've got a really interesting one for you today. We are going to be talking all about solid-state batteries, solid power, ticker symbol SLDP. They're making some serious waves in the electric vehicle battery world, and we're going to break down all the reasons why that is. We've got a whole stack of sources here, news articles, financial reports, even some technical analysis. So we're going to, really try and give you a well-rounded picture of what's going on with solid power.
Yeah, what's so fascinating about solid power to me is that they're not just, developing some new technology. We're talking about a company entering a market that is absolutely exploding right now. I mean, the demand for electric vehicles is just,
Yeah.
it's growing so rapidly. And with that comes a huge need for better batteries.
For sure, and
Ah.
that's really where solid power, solid-state batteries could be a real disruptor. I mean, think about it. We've all heard about the limitations of those lithium-ion batteries, range anxiety, the long charging times, even safety concerns. But solid-state batteries, they really have the potential to address all of those issues.
Exactly. And you know that potential. It's attracting a lot of attention. And not just from like everyday consumers. We're talking about major players in the automotive industry. I mean, the big news this week. Solid Power extended their partnership with Ford through 2025. Now, this isn't just, a handshake agreement. This is a clear sign that Ford sees real value in Solid Power's technology, and they are willing to invest in its development.
Yeah, and it's not just Ford, right? Solid Power is also working with SK On,
Yeah.
and they are a leading battery manufacturer
Yeah.
to develop these solid-state batteries specifically for electric vehicles.
Yeah.
So it seems like Solid Power is building a pretty impressive network of partners,
Mm.
which, that could give them a real edge in this
Yeah.
very competitive market.
For sure. Partnerships like these, they're absolutely crucial for a company like Solid Power. They provide not only financial backing, but also access to manufacturing expertise, established supply chains. It's so much easier to scale up production and get your product into the market when you've got industry giants in your corner.
I totally agree. And speaking of scaling up production, Solid Power is also in talks to secure a $50 million grant from the U.S. Department of Energy.
Yeah.
And that kind of funding could be a real game changer for them, allowing them to build out their production facilities
Hmm.
and really accelerate those research and development efforts.
Yeah, government investment in clean energy technology, that's a huge signal to the market. It shows that there's serious support behind this transition to sustainable solutions. And companies like Solid Power, they're really well positioned to benefit from that.
Absolutely. And all of this positive news has definitely caught the attention of investors. Solid Power stock, SLDP, recently surged to a 52-week high of $2.68 after that Ford partnership extension was announced. That's a 50% jump in just 1 week.
It's definitely an exciting time for Solid Power, but it's important to remember that. They're still a relatively young company in a very competitive landscape. They've got the technology, the partners, and now the potential for some significant government funding. But turning that potential into real sustainable profits, that's still a challenge.
Okay, so let's kind of break down their recent financial performance. Solid Power released their Q3 2024 earnings report. And while revenue was up, they still reported a net loss of $22.4 million. Is that typical for a company in this phase of growth?
It's not uncommon for companies in emerging industries to operate at a loss, especially when they're investing so heavily in research and development. They're focused on building the technology, expanding their capacity, and securing their market position. The key is to look for signs that they're moving towards profitability.
So should investors be concerned about this net loss? Or is it something to be expected given Solid Power's current stage of development?
It's definitely something to consider, but it shouldn't be a cause for alarm on its own. The real question is whether Solid Power can continue to grow its revenue at a rate that outpaces its expenses. If they can do that, then they'll be on a path towards profitability, even if it takes some time.
All right, let's get into some of the technical indicators for Solid Power. As of January 6, 2025, the stock is trading at $2.20, which is down from its recent high, but still significantly above its 52-week low of $1. So that tells me there's some volatility, but also that there's still a lot of interest in this company.
Right. The volatility isn't surprising, given the recent news and the general excitement surrounding this solid-state battery technology. But to really understand where this stock might be heading, we need to dig into some other technical indicators.
Okay, so what are the technicals telling us?
Well, right now, the current price is above both the 50-day and 200-day moving averages, which can be a positive sign for some investors, suggesting a potential uptrend. But the Relative Strength Index, or RSI, is currently sitting at 46.24, which indicates a fairly neutral position. It's neither overbought nor oversold.
So mixed signals there.
Right.
What about the average directional index, or ADX?
The ADX is at 17.38, which suggests a weak trend in either direction. It's a bit of a waiting game right now. We're looking for stronger signals to emerge before making any firm conclusions about the short-term direction of the stock.
So it sounds like we have a company with a potentially revolutionary technology, some impressive partnerships, and the possibility of government funding on the horizon. But they're also operating at a loss and haven't quite proven that they can scale up production to meet the expected demand.
Exactly. There's a lot to be excited about with Solid Power. But there are also risks to consider. It's a classic high-risk, high-reward scenario, and it's essential to weigh both sides carefully before making any investment decisions.
Let's delve deeper into those partnerships and see how they might influence Solid Power's trajectory. We'll be right back after a quick break.
Sounds good. You mentioned Solid Power's partnership with SK On earlier. That's a particularly interesting one. SK On is a global leader in battery manufacturing, and their involvement suggests that Solid Power is serious about scaling up production, to meet that growing demand for electric vehicle batteries.
Yeah, it's not just about developing the technology, it's about having the infrastructure and the expertise to actually produce these batteries on a mass scale. And it seems like Solid Power understands that. And they're making the right moves to position themselves for success in the long run.
Absolutely. It's one thing to, create a prototype in a lab, but it's a whole other ballgame to manufacture millions of batteries that meet those stringent safety and performance standards required for electric vehicles. That's where a partner like SK On brings invaluable experience and resources to the table.
For sure, and that expertise could be especially crucial. As Solid Power works to overcome one of the biggest challenges facing solid-state battery technology: scalability. Producing these batteries at a cost that's competitive with lithium-ion batteries, that's a major hurdle.
Exactly, and that's where that potential $50 million grant from the Department of Energy could really make a difference. It could help Solid Power invest in the equipment and the research needed to bring down that cost of production and make their batteries more commercially viable.
It seems like that grant could be a real turning point for Solid Power. It could accelerate their progress towards mass production and give them significant advantage over competitors who are still struggling to scale up.
It's certainly a possibility, but it's important to remember that government funding is never guaranteed. Solid Power is still in talks with the Department of Energy, and there's no guarantee that they'll secure the full amount.
That's true.
Yeah.
And even if they do get the grant, there's still a lot of work to be done. They need to prove that they can overcome those technical challenges of mass production, manage their costs effectively, and ultimately deliver a product that meets the needs of this rapidly evolving electric vehicle market.
Right. There's also the competitive landscape to consider. Solid Power is far from the only company working on solid-state battery technology. There are established players like Toyota and Samsung, as well as a number of startups all vying for a share of this potentially lucrative market.
So Solid Power is facing competition from both established giants and agile startups. How does their technology stack up against the competition?
That's a complex question, and there's no easy answer. Each company has its own approach to solid-state battery technology. With the different chemistries, designs, and manufacturing processes, it's still too early to say definitively who has the best technology, as the field is constantly evolving.
So what are some of the key factors investors should consider when comparing Solid Power to its competitors?
Well, one important factor is the company's partnerships and collaborations. As we've discussed, Solid Power has secured partnerships with major players like Ford and SK On, which gives them access to valuable resources and expertise.
Right. Those partnerships seem to give them a real edge. In terms of commercialization and scaling up production, what are the technical aspects of their batteries? Are there any key performance metrics that stand out?
Solid Power claims that their batteries offer significant advantages over conventional lithium-ion batteries in terms of energy density, charging time, and safety. They've also emphasized their focus on developing a solid-state battery that can be manufactured using existing lithium-ion production processes, which could potentially make it easier and cheaper to scale up production.
Those are some impressive claims. But it's important to remember that they haven't been fully validated. In a real-world setting, we'll need to see more data and independent testing to confirm these performance advantages.
Exactly. It's crucial to approach these claims with a healthy dose of skepticism. The solid-state battery space is full of hype, and it's important to distinguish between marketing promises and demonstrable results.
Okay, so we've got the partnerships, the technology, the potential funding, and the competition all in the mix. It seems like there are a lot of moving parts to consider when evaluating Solid Power as an investment.
Absolutely, and that's what makes this such an interesting and potentially rewarding space to watch. The electric vehicle revolution is just getting started, and the companies that can crack the code on solid-state battery technology stand to reap enormous benefits.
But it's clearly not a guaranteed win. There are risks, challenges, and uncertainties ahead for Solid Power. What are some of the key red flags that investors should be watching out for?
Well, one major concern is the company's ability to execute on its ambitious plans. They've set some aggressive targets for scaling up production and achieving profitability, and any delays or setbacks could significantly impact their stock price.
So investors need to pay close attention to the company's progress in meeting those milestones. What about the competitive landscape? Are there any specific competitors that pose a particularly significant threat to Solid Power?
QuantumScape is a company that often comes up in these discussions. They're another well-funded startup working on solid-state battery technology, and they've made some bold claims about the performance of their batteries. It's worth keeping an eye on their progress
Okay.
and how it compares to Solid Power's.
All right, QuantumScape is definitely one to watch.
Mhm.
And then there are the established players like Toyota and Samsung. How does Solid Power plan to compete with those giants who have vast resources and decades of experience in the battery industry?
That's a key question. And it'll be interesting to see how Solid Power navigates that challenge. They're betting on their innovative technology and their agility as a smaller company to give them an edge. They're also focusing on partnerships to gain access to the resources and expertise they need to compete on a larger scale.
So it's a combination of technological innovation, strategic partnerships, and a bit of a David versus Goliath mentality. It sounds like a fascinating and potentially very lucrative battle for dominance in the solid-state battery market.
It certainly is. And for investors who are willing to do their due diligence and carefully assess the risks and rewards, companies like Solid Power offer a unique opportunity to be a part of this transformative shift in the automotive industry.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here: the technology, the partnerships, the competition, the financials, and the technical indicators. Let's shift gears now and take a look at what the analysts are saying about Solid Power's prospects. What are their predictions for the company's future? So let's talk about those analysts. What are they saying about Solid Power?
Well, it seems like there's a real mix of opinions out there. Some are incredibly bullish on Solid Power, while others are taking a more cautious approach.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, it is a
Yeah.
pretty new company.
Yeah. Exactly. You've got analysts who see Solid Power as a potential leader. In this solid-state battery revolution, they point to the partnerships with Ford and SK On as major signs of future growth. Some even believe that SLDP could reach $5 or even $10 per share in the coming years if they execute their plans effectively.
Well, that's pretty optimistic. But it sounds like there's some analysts who aren't quite as convinced.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's another camp that's a bit more cautious. They acknowledge the potential, of course, but they really emphasize those challenges that Solid Power still faces. Things like scaling up production to meet that massive demand and actually becoming profitable. Those are big hurdles to overcome.
Yeah, for sure. So it's almost like there are two sides to the Solid Power story right now: the incredible potential of their technology,
Yeah.
and then the very real challenges they have to overcome to turn that potential into success. So what do you think is the biggest factor that will determine whether they sink or swim?
That's a tough question, you know? I think it really comes down to execution. They've got the technology, they've got the partnerships, potentially even the government funding, but can they actually deliver on their promises? Can they scale up production without sacrificing quality or blowing their budget? Can they stay ahead of the competition in this incredibly fast-moving industry? Those are the questions investors need to be asking themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense. So for investors who are considering Solid Power, what's the key takeaway here? Is this a company they should be jumping on board with right now?
Well, that's a decision every investor has to make for themselves, based on their own risk tolerance and investment goals. Solid Power definitely has the potential to be a huge winner in the long run, but it's not a sure thing. It's a classic high-risk, high-reward scenario. If solid-state batteries really do become the standard for electric vehicles, Solid Power could see explosive growth. But if they stumble, if they can't scale up, or if a competitor leapfrogs them, the investment could backfire.
So do your research, understand the risks, and don't invest more than you can afford to lose. That's always good advice in the world of investing, especially when dealing with emerging technologies.
Couldn't agree more. It's always important to remember that investing in individual companies is inherently risky. Diversification is key.
Absolutely. All right, so to wrap up this episode of Investing Talk podcast on Solid Power, it's clear this is a company with a ton of potential. They're in a rapidly growing market. They've got cutting-edge technology. They've partnered with some major players, and they could even get a big boost from the government. But there are challenges too. Scaling up production, becoming profitable, and staying ahead of the competition.
It's going to be a really interesting company to watch.
It definitely is. So as always, we love hearing from you. If you enjoyed this episode of Investing Talk podcast, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. We will be back next week with a brand new episode. Until then, happy investing.